All right, let's dive right into another deep dive with a look at Chapter 16 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. You know we're here to help you teach this chapter, and it's a big one. It's got twists and turns and all sorts of excitement. So we're going to give you some insights to help make your lesson planning smooth and easy.
Yeah, we're talking exams, right? Exams are happening and the attacks are still going on and nobody knows anything about the Chamber of Secrets yet. Still, it's not all doom and gloom. There's a little hope with the mandrakes.
The mandrakes, you're right, they're finally ready, which means the petrified students, they're about to wake up.
Yeah.
And maybe one of them knows who's been behind all of this. But first, the exams. I mean, can you imagine having exams in the middle of all this chaos?
This is a good point, actually, because it highlights something really important about the wizarding world. Even with a dangerous monster running around, they still value education, routine, and order. It's like a testament to their dedication to learning. You could ask your students, how does this detail help us understand, like, the bigger ideas in this chapter?
That's a good question to ask them. I like it. Let's talk about Ginny Weasley, though, for a minute. She's acting very, well, suspicious, don't you think? I mean, she's definitely hiding something, and it seems to be connected to this whole chamber business.
I agree, yeah. Ginny's anxiety, the way she's acting, reminds me a lot of Dobby, when he was trying to warn Harry. It's like another mystery within the bigger mystery. Think about this. What could Ginny know? And why is she so scared? These are great questions, really great questions to get your students talking and thinking.
For sure, for sure. Okay, here's where it gets good. Gilderoy Lockhart. Everybody loves him, right? He's famous, he's an author, but guess what? He's a total fraud. He's been stealing other wizard stories and then using memory charms to make people forget. Can you believe it? What a twist.
Lockhart's downfall, when everybody finds out who he really is, it's a really good contrast with Harry. Harry's brave, Harry's honest, and it brings up some questions about, like, what's right and wrong, perfect for discussions in class, What do your students think about what Lockhart did? Does it go against what Harry believes in? How?
Yeah, it's like watching a big tower just crumble. It's fascinating. First the confrontation and then that whole memory charm mess. I mean, it all just falls apart.
It's funny, though, because in a way, his incompetence helps Harry grow. Harry steps up, he takes charge, and he makes a really tough decision. He decides to go into the chamber alone. He has to leave Ron behind with Lockhart, who, Lockhart can't remember anything.
Such a brave decision, but scary too, right? But before Harry goes down into the chamber, there's something else that happens that's really important. They finally figure out what this monster is.
This is where it all comes together. Hermione's research, remember that page ripped out of a library book? It tells them that the monster is a basilisk, a giant snake, and its gaze is deadly.
Like a light bulb moment, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, all the weird things that have been happening, the petrified students, the spiders running away, the roosters dying, and even that voice that only Harry could hear, it all makes sense.
Exactly. And the basilisk, I mean, it's more than just a scary monster, right? It's a symbol of the dangers of prejudice. And it's like connected to the dark side of Slytherin and his ideas. This is an opportunity to talk to your students about symbols, about symbolism in literature. What does the basilisk really represent?
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that prejudice, it can have really, really bad consequences, monstrous even. Okay, and then there's that amazing scene in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the setting. It's so eerie. And then there's Myrtle's story, so sad. And then they find this secret entrance. And Harry uses Parseltongue to open it. What an amazing buildup of suspense.
You can really see how Rowling builds the suspense. Ask your students to notice it, to really pay attention to it. And don't forget to point out how important Harry's Parseltongue is. The fact that he can talk to snakes. It shows that he's connected to Voldemort in some way, which is, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, that ability to talk to snakes, it definitely makes them different. Okay, so then they go down into the tunnel, and they find that shed skin from the basilisk. So creepy.
Oh, it's scary, and it really adds to the tension and the uncertainty. And then Lockhart tries to use a memory charm on Harry and Ron. Talk about a coward, right? Your students can compare him to Harry's bravery. It's a great contrast.
And then, as if it wasn't intense enough already, Harry decides to keep going alone into the chamber. He leaves Ron with Lockhart, who still can't remember anything. Yeah. And that's how the chapter ends, on a huge cliffhanger.
Yeah, what a moment. Harry's so courageous, so determined. He wants to save Ginny. Ask your students, what would you do if you were Harry? What would you do? So We were talking about the chamber. The Chamber of Secrets, it's not just a creepy place where the monster lives, or it's more than that. It's part of Slytherin's legacy, and all that prejudice that's like built into the history of the wizarding world, it's all there in the chamber.
It's a dark place,
Yeah.
literally dark, but also, like figuratively dark. Harry going down there into the chamber, it's like he's confronting the worst parts of the wizarding world, darkest parts.
That's it, exactly. It's like a metaphor, right? For facing your fears, facing the unknown. Your students, they can think about that. How does the chamber, how does it show the dangers of prejudice and the temptation of power?
And don't forget, Harry's dealing with all of this, the chamber, the monster, and he still has to worry about exams. It's got a little detail, but it shows how different the adult world is from the world of these kids.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like the adults are trying to keep things normal, but the kids, they're facing something, well, something extraordinary. It's a really interesting difference in perspective, and it shapes the whole story. It makes you think, how does it shape the story?
It's a good way to help your students connect with the characters, right? Even in a magical world, kids still have to deal with, the normal stuff, like exams. Okay, but back to Ginny Weasley for a second. It's becoming pretty obvious that she's connected to the chamber somehow, and it's kind of sad to see her struggling like this.
Ginny's so vulnerable, right? And she can't talk about what she knows. She can't tell anyone. It makes the story, it gives it more emotional depth. This is something you can discuss with your students. Communication, how hard it can be sometimes, especially, between brothers and sisters. Why do you think Ginny's having such a hard time confiding in her brothers?
Yeah, it's a struggle a lot of kids can relate to. And speaking of struggles, let's talk about Lockhart again. Remember when everybody finds out he's a fake? It's a good moment, it's satisfying, but it's also a good teaching moment,
Oh, absolutely. Lockhart, he's a cautionary tale. He shows us what happens when you care more about being famous than being good at what you do. You can talk about that with your students. Compare Lockhart to Harry. Their motivations, the choices they make. What does it mean to be a real hero?
It's a great lesson, a lesson that goes beyond just this book, right? Being a hero, a real hero, it means facing your fears and doing the right thing, even when it's hard. And, Harry going into the chamber alone, that's a big moment for him. It shows how much he's grown.
It really does, yeah. It shows how brave he is, how selfless. He's willing to risk his life for Ginny. You can talk about that with your students. That decision to go into the chamber, it's a big one. It shows how Harry's changing, how he's growing up.
He's so determined, it's incredible. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about Parseltongue. This might be a new concept for some of your students, especially the younger ones.
Yeah.
They might need a little explanation.
Yeah, for sure. Think of Parseltongue as a symbol. It symbolizes Harry's connection to the wizarding world and his destiny. It's a special ability, but it has, good and bad sides. You can discuss that. How does Parseltongue make Harry different from everyone else?
It's a powerful adversity, but as we see later in the books, it also connects him to Voldemort, which is, well, it's interesting and a little scary at the same time.
Right. As we get closer to the end of the chapter, the tension really starts to build. Rowling, she uses foreshadowing, and her descriptions are so vivid, so real. You feel like you're there, and you can feel the dread, the anticipation.
Oh yeah, like that shed skin from the basilisk. And the way she describes the chamber, so creepy. And then that silence, like everything's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen.
Those details, they're important. Encourage your students to notice them, to see how they create the mood of the chapter. It's a good way to really understand how good writing works. So we talked a lot about this chapter, all the different parts of it. Now let's think about how you can actually teach it, how you can make it come alive for your students, give you some strategies to use in the classroom.
I love it. Yeah, strategies. I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear some practical tips, some things they can use right away. So where should we start? What's a good first step?
Close reading. Close reading is always a good place to start. Have your students really dig into the text, Look at the language that Rowling uses, the images, the foreshadowing. Get out those highlighters. Let them mark up the text. It's a great way to help them really understand what's going on.
Close reading. Yeah, I like that. It's amazing what students can find when they really look closely at the words and how the author put the story together. And what about visual aids? I've always found those to be really helpful, especially when you're teaching literature.
Oh, visual aids are great. Yeah, they can really make a difference. You could use a timeline, maybe a character map, or even a diagram of the Chamber of Secrets. something to help your students visualize what's happening in the story.
Yeah, exactly. Bring the story to life. Make it real for them. You could even make it a project, a class project. Have them build a model of the chamber or, create some illustrations of the important scenes.
Now you're talking. That's a great idea. Hands-on learning, it helps them understand and it lets them be creative. They can work together as a team. Okay, so we've got close reading and visual aids. Now, what about discussions? How can we get those discussions going? What kinds of questions can we ask?
Well, how about starting with those exams? Why would the school have exams in the middle of a crisis like this?
That's a good one, yeah. It makes you think, doesn't it? It shows the difference between the adults and the students, like what's important to them. What do their priorities tell us about the wizarding world, how it works, how they think?
It's a great way to start a debate, get them thinking critically. And of course, we can't forget Lockhart. When he's exposed as a fraud, that's a perfect opportunity to talk about what it means to be a hero.
Hmm.
A real hero, not a fake one. Compare him to Harry. Talk about their choices, why they do what they do.
Exactly. It's like the classic battle between good and evil, right? Bravery versus cowardice. And while we're on the subject of characters, let's talk about Moaning Myrtle. She might seem like a minor character, but she's actually pretty important.
I agree. I mean, at first you might think she's just there for comic relief, but she's more than that.
Her story, her backstory, it's tragic. And she's connected to the chamber in a way that adds to the mystery, to that creepy feeling. Ask your students to think about why she's there.
Hmm.
What's her purpose? What does she symbolize? Why is she so interested in Harry?
It's interesting how even a character who's, not a main character can add so much to the story. And speaking of adding to the story, Rowling's so good at foreshadowing, at building suspense. She keeps you guessing, keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Have your students be detectives. Look for those clues, those hints that she drops throughout the chapter. It's like a game, and it helps them develop their analytical skills.
I like that, yeah. It's like a literary treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And once they start seeing those clues, noticing how she does it, it's like they're reading the story on a whole different level.
And that's what it's all about, right? It's not just about understanding what happens in the story. It's about helping them become better readers, better thinkers, more engaged with the words on the page.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about, a lot of great ideas to use in their classrooms. So go out there and teach this chapter. You've got this.
And remember, the most important thing is to help your students love reading, love learning, to show them how magical storytelling can be.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, listeners. We hope you feel ready to tackle this amazing chapter with your students. Happy teaching, everyone.